when you look at what Mueller was doing, he farmed out 14 big cases, right, to various jurisdictions around the country. And one by one, Barr has gone through these and stopped them or removed them. So you've got a situation now that Barr is sort of whitewashing a really big part of American history and a really big crime against the American Constitution.
And it's really, really obvious that he's doing it.
And then the next thing we know, on December 28th, Obama introduces new sanctions against Russia.
Russia interfering in democracies in the West is not new to the point of it's 100 years old. They've been, A/B testing and deploying techniques and technologies, since the Russian Revolution to some degree on their Western adversaries. So this was not new, but what was new, and every level of the intelligence community has concluded this, was the scale, the scope, the breadth, the naked aggression of Russia and its constituent partners in this effort, which looks like it includes at least Israel as well. Nobody's attacked our democracies this hard with propaganda and paid agents ever before. They have had these things in place before and maybe had demonstrable effects, but never so brazenly and so intensely. I know many analysts that conclude that once Obama and Robert S. Mueller III declared war on transnational organized crime, starting with the Russian Vori Russian Red Mafia, and all its partners around the world, and started shutting its banking down, especially when they started shutting it down hard with the Magnitsky Act in 2013, that you have this lunge for the throat by Russia and some other people that are partnered with Russia, spreading that laundered, crime money around, and that can, involve several nation states. But things got very desperate. And if you look by 2014, Putin is taking increasingly risky, intense moves geopolitically, even though economically and militarily they might not be in a place to do this. It's very Russian for them to test out Barack Obama, who had pretty much tried to have some form of a reset and get the economy under control and whatnot. But in 2014, they invade part of Ukraine and take Crimea and are shooting planes out of the sky. And then 2015, we get Donald Trump, who is in some form of debt to the Russians and others, running for president. And then they put their full weight in. That gets us to November 8th. Everyone's surprised. And I knew from my sources that a lot of interference was deployed on the day of the election, and right around there, things were unveiled that nobody expected anybody to be that brazen, and probably even the people behind it didn't expect it to work. They didn't expect Trump to be president, but surprise, he won, and that caused the intelligence community to leap forward and trying to analyze as much as possible. And they would have, by late December, they knew a lot of, okay, you guys did this, these guys did this, and of course you're going to have multiple FBI investigations, criminal counterintelligence, multiple agencies tracking all sorts of players. But for whether they like it or not, that means that the incoming Trump administration had a lot of eyes on them from a lot of countries. And then, Mike Flynn crosses the line around Christmas when Obama gets enough information. All right, we need to smack these guys back. We need to show our doctrine for national security. You attacked us, and we're going to start here with making persona non grata a great number of your diplomats, parentheses, spies, closing down 2 of your houses, spy centrals, spy headquarters.
Compounds, yeah.
Those are, dachas, if you will. We're taking those, and your 35 guys are PNG. Sorry, going to just revert to the slang.
Yeah.
And normally there will be some form of response in that, and that was done to show an adversary, you're going to pay for this kind of behavior, so let's start here. And this is where Flynn crossed a major line. He called the Russian ambassador and said, don't worry about that. Don't respond.
Yes,
We'll take care of you.
moderate your response to those sanctions is what he was requesting of Kislev to pass on to Putin. And Putin was moderate. He didn't do anything. He didn't respond. The next
And
day,
then Trump, before he's even president, is tweeting saying, "Oh, he's very smart, that Putin. I like the cut of his jib."
yeah,
Just like nobody ever does.
great move on the delay by V. Putin was the tweet. I've always knew he was very smart. Yeah, so there you go.
Very smart.
I mean, there's nothing possible. I mean, it's so undercutting of the current American foreign policy and just the foreign policy for the last 40 or 50 or 70 years that it's kind of astonishing that the incoming president would be so brazen in attacking the outgoing president policy as he was implementing it, and really tells you the kind of strength I believe that Russia and its allies, Saudi Arabia and UAE, Israel, were implementing. They felt so strong at this point. They felt like they had enough of a position to do what they were doing, even to ask the incoming administration and their officials to commit a crime.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't mean it was the smartest move they ever made. But at the time, maybe it seemed like something they could get away with. And this is another test. Like, well, let's see if their deep state, if you will respond to this. Let's see if the national security infrastructure will, arrest Flynn earlier. This is a brand new world. They're going to have one of their agents in the White House.
This may have been a test by them to sort of to test the boundaries, to see how much they can work with the intelligence community and how much they have to play with in terms of the FBI.
I think everybody involved on our, let's call it our side, their side, any side. I know for myself, I got about 1 hour of sleep per night for about a month. I was, what do you know? What do you know? What do you know? What's going on? I'm pretty sure they were doing the same thing. And if you look at some of the declassified transcripts, I'm seeing that, my colleagues in the SCIFs, in the deep, dungeons of intelligence, they were doing the same thing. Like, what's going on? What's going on? And no, we were in brand new territory. And so it's very typical of Russia to try to make a very aggressive move and see what you do. And they're almost like, I don't want this to be too derogatory, though I'm not too happy with them, but they're like dogs in this manner. It's like they're looking to be the alpha, and they're going to put their paw on yours and see if are you going to flinch? Are you going to make are you going to respond, or are we going to make another move and see if you respond then? That tends to be their stock in trade diplomatically, and certainly in terms of intelligence operations. And so they're just like, my God, they're letting us get away with this. Now, long term, does that work out really well for them? Well, history's not written yet on that. But
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Obama didn't react. As no drama Obama, as he was known for a good reason. He was not known to react. Well, privately, he was known to have a bit of a temper, but publicly, he would not sort of have these outbursts against provocation that Putin must have expected from him when he first did this. So, in some ways, Obama didn't do very much. You could actually argue from a conservative, right-wing, hawkish perspective that Obama was really weak. He wasn't, but you could argue that. In fact, they're arguing the exact opposite, that he was eavesdropping on the incoming administration and entrapping them. Nothing could be further from the truth than that. There was just normal FBI investigation going on and typical surveillance.
Look, you have the right to privacy as an American citizen. The second you get a security clearance and work in national security, even after you retire, you have a lot less right to it. And once you join a presidential administration, you can kiss it for the most part goodbye. But let's just take you as a regular citizen in the United States. You do have the right to privacy. You do not have the right to form conspiracies with hostile foreign intelligence services. Right. That's not one of your guaranteed constitutional rights. And trying to exercise it is a good way to get yourself on some form of FBI surveillance. Sorry, and it's insane to me that there are people trying to sell this to cover up for the fact that essentially there were a bunch of traitors here who were selling out their country.
Right. And they must have known. I mean, how can someone like Flynn, or as you were saying earlier, anybody of these people have not known they were under surveillance? It seems kind of bizarre that they wouldn't think they were under surveillance.
Well, especially when you learn that the Flynn made this phone call to Sergei Kislyak from the Dominican Republic.
Yes, that's right. He then goes off to Punta Cana, right? Which is why at that point you're about to become a major figure in the government. Why are you going to Punta Cana in the first place? What's into the Dominican Republic that he needs to go be there on New Year's Eve of 2016 into 2017? Sorry, that's seems an unusual place to go.
Great place at the time if you wanted to traffic a lot of cocaine, like the Peralta organization that was subsequently indicted. Good place for coke traffickers. If you're into military juntas, there's been reason to go there over the decades. But I remind everyone that even though he was DIA head, I believe Mike Flynn's first assignments in his first duties in the U.S. Army was doing signals intelligence. Mm-hmm. So anybody who's the head of an intelligence agency understands that if you're using consumer grade electronics, even things that you assume to be encrypted to some degree or another, you have to assume that there are players out there that can pick them up. But certainly anyone serious in intel knows that if you're using your own cell phone, even in a country like the United States where you have constitutional protections, whereas in France, good luck, you don't. They will intercept whatever they want, and if they think it's useful for national security, they'll listen to it, use it, whatever. But even then, if you're in the intelligence world, if you're talking to the Russian ambassador on a phone, that is being recorded by someone or lots of someone.
It should be.
And if you're in the Dominican Republic, that is not NATO, that is not a Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance nation, you're talking about Nigerian intelligence getting a copy. You're, Belizean intelligence, whoever. You're not being careful at all. And the fact that you're there hanging out while you're waiting to be head of the National Security Council, I mean, there's just so many things wrong on so many levels.
I really would like to know who he was seeing there. I mean, there must have been someone to have gone all the way there. There must have been someone he was meeting with. They certainly like these island destinations to go off and do their secret meetings, or they seem to have during that period. It would seem amazing to me if he was just going there on a typical vacation, but who knows? Maybe he was. So let's take a look at the January time period. So now we get to January 12th, and Washington Post reveals that Flynn and Kislyak had that call, and they reveal what happened there. And then on January 15, Pence is on TV, and he denies that Flynn spoke to him. So this is the core of that conversation. We had basically the reason why Flynn was fired was because he lied to Pence about his conversations with Kislyak. That's the brunt of of why Trump decided to fire Flynn. That's correct, right?
That's their story. That's right. So, Pence, who was apparently picked by Paul Manafort, who is a straight up agent for the Russian Federation and the Russian mob, picks out Pence. And, they have transition emails from that period of time where I believe it's Katie McFarland says, with regards to those sanctions, well, the only reason that Obama's putting those sanctions on Russia is because Russia gave us the win in the election. And if you have, very little in terms of privacy, once you're on incoming into an administration to begin with, they were using transition emails that provided to them by the General Services Administration. That's the government agency in charge of physical infrastructure, everything down to coffee creamer and staplers and stuff like that. They set them up their temporary offices. So they're already part of the government. And they're like, yeah, Russia gave us the win. And when Mueller wanted to pick that information up to find out what they were talking about during the transition, he didn't need a subpoena. Our taxpayer dollars already bought that. So he just picked up the phone and said, hey, can you send me those? And whoop, right over to Bob Mueller's office.
Oh, that's interesting.
and they had December 2017. I mean, I was in Manhattan, oddly enough, and I remember checking my phone and just being dumb and mute and like leaning on a building. Just, you're kidding me that these guys they were on on their government email, like, oh yeah, the only reason they're being mean to those Russians is because they gave us the election. These are inside voices, kids. If we are conspiring with Russia, we do not say so out loud.
Right. Well, it seems to be the Trump MO, just say whatever you did and expect it to go away just because you've said it out loud.
Indeed. And sometimes that is just yet one more exhibit for the prosecutors at court.
Right.
So,
if he ever gets there. Now, I want to show you a couple of things that I don't think people are very aware of. Firstly, there's a couple of meetings that Flynn attended that happened sort of in another narrative, which was sort of the Seychelles, Israel, Iran narrative that aren't really gelled into with this particular timeline. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed. So there's two meetings. One happened in December. I'm not sure if this is the same one. I don't think it is the same one. It's MBZ flies into New York. He meets with Bannon, Flynn, and Jared Kushner. MBZ is the crown prince of the UAE. And he's there to discuss, potentially Iran and their Iran strategy going forward. And that happens somewhere in December, right? Somewhere in the first few weeks of December. So I'll put that other timeline back up in a second and we'll see where it fits in. And then in January, which is the time period we're now talking about, George Nader, who's potentially also an Israeli asset, but he's definitely working for the UAE and Saudi Arabia. He is in New York City, and he meets with Flynn, Bannon, Zamel, the Israeli social media guy, and Asari, who's the Saudi guy, on Iran. This is all happening while there is a giant conversation and investigation going on about whether Flynn is actually compromised by the Russians.
Well, that is a hell of a timeline. People that they were working with, all the while not having made the regular diplomatic calls to our allies in order. The United Kingdom, the special relationship, Australia, our most reliable military partner, Canada, our biggest trade partner, and down the line. They hadn't done that, but they're hanging out with MBZ and these kind of rogue Israeli elements in New York and elsewhere, and talking Iran policy. And it just happens to be folks that are involved with laundering a whole lot of Iranian money. It's just a really remarkable, set of priorities between being elected kind of by accident and taking over the most important jobs of anybody's lifetime. They were really busy meeting with people that had a completely different plan for the future of the world.
They really did. I mean, it looks to me like they basically were trying to sort of rearrange the world in the way they wanted to. And the way, you've got a series of events there. If you look at them, it's all these world leaders sending their representatives to the Seychelles, but having pre-meetings and post-meetings with actual things that came out of that Seychelles meeting. So even though Eric Princeton initially described the Seychelles meeting as, bumping into someone at a bar, it was much, much more than that. It was the centerpiece of a series of events and series of meetings that took place, which involved changing the balance of power in the world.
They were talking about transferring United States nuclear technology to the Middle East. They were, and let's just cut to the chase here. What was going on here was there was a global conspiracy to change the geostrategic center of the world to Eurasia, a partnership between Russia, China, the Gulf states, Iran to a degree, and that they were going to throw off the chains of the United States and NATO and the post-World War II era, and they were going to be in charge. Gosh darn it. I think they were headed for the year 2020 was when they wanted the real shift in the United States. And again, just cut and paste. The story's got to come out at some point. Their plan was for a Hillary Clinton presidency to go extremely poorly, for there to be violence on U.S. soil, and to show that the American experiment had run its course. There was a nefarious plan here, and people it started, I think, about 4 years earlier, getting somebody like Trump in power, and they didn't really have a plan for somebody who was so obviously diseased in so many ways, metaphorical and otherwise, to take power. And I remember talking to people in those months and going, who is going to work with this guy that knows anything? And then the answer came back, nobody. And so this is when you get Ben Carson, who came out and said, I do not belong in a cabinet position. And then 2 days later, he's taking a cabinet position. It was just so strange, but it makes sense in retrospect that, people got wind of this, unless there was already compromising photos of you and farm animals somewhere, you were going to avoid these people. But there are some out there who couldn't, and people cashed in their chips and with those assets. But this was in furtherance of a bigger scheme to damage America and to make it no longer the leader of the world, and to have these authoritarian regimes buttressed by technology and propaganda and fueled by fossil fuel energy, economically and otherwise, that they were going to run the world, and we were not. And I think they got the go-ahead a few years too early with people that did not really have the skills for it. So they just went for it. And they're like, okay, let's meet at Trump Tower and see how it goes. Well, how it went was, look, when, MBZ flies into the United States without checking in through the State Department, we still know where that plane's coming from. You can't just sneak into our country as a dignitary and think we're not going to know, and yet they did this. Yeah. And you have these people that, again, going back to some of what I was saying at the beginning of the program about, if you have a security clearance, you're worried about, too many nights at the bingo hall. And, we went on vacation in Mexico. Oh, did I take some margarita glasses as a gift? That is so far below what these guys are doing, just openly meeting with hostile intelligence services that are under investigation by a number of players. It's just so reckless. My phrase I use is, you can see it from space. Right. This is not well hidden.
But from your perspective, this is them just sort of gunning it because they were hoping to have another 4 more years. They basically were making it up as they went along.
And at some point, you've committed crimes that are so horrific that your end is not going to be very good. I think everybody in this drama right now who's been on the wrong side of history, they have to continue on with their treason, or they will get the business end of somebody's nasty intelligence operative, or get Russian window cancer, or spend life in prison. So they're doing whatever they can now, and this is where I get a lot of Bill Barr's actions that I just interpret as flailing and just trying to, what's going on with Flynn. It's like he's Christopher Reeve in Superman 2 trying to fly around the planet backwards to unindict and uninvestigate Flynn, and file all this, this complete insane garbage in the District of DC court, which is not a place to mess around. You don't have the right to go through with the deal you made with this guy. It's like, no, you can't drop charges that were never brought. Flynn signed a contract with Judge to say, yes, don't charge me with treason, and I will make life easy for you. I will proffer what I know, and I will do. He was looking at a single 18 U.S. Code 1001 charge. That's a max of 6 months and a few bucks of fine. First time nonviolent offender, you're looking at a couple of weeks picking up garbage in minimum security prison. Frankly, less unpleasant than spending all summer cooped inside, due to COVID-19. You could get on with your life after that. And yet they're moving heaven and earth to try and unindict him. And I think there's a lot of people going, well, wait, isn't there a pardon coming? And you can look back at the FBI 302s that released a couple months back, which I went through page by page, 600 pages of them. And you've got texts between Manafort and Rick Gates where they're saying, or where Manafort's like, hold on, pardon's coming, Trump will take care of us. Whereas, well, no, you're co-conspirators and you'll have to allocute to your guilt. And if you're guilty for treason, then in getting Trump elected, then he's guilty too. So that's not showing up. And there's all these people who, once they start confessing and proffering so that they do not spend the rest of life in the penitentiary, that they will be giving away. It's like a chain reaction. And I think that's why William Barr is doing things that no third-year law student would consider. One with a really bad crank habit and no sense at all would avoid this stuff.
So what you're saying is that the pardons are not going to work in this case, ultimately, that there's too much, that you can't pardon a co-conspirator, is what I think you're saying, and there's all these other crimes that these guys allegedly committed. Not allegedly, because they haven't been charged, but there's the emails thing where they were trying to get these emails from various people. Someone died in Chicago, and they were hunting, so there could possibly be a murder or manslaughter involved in there. You've got the UN resolution, which was the Logan Act. That's just two off the top of my head. There's probably several other charges that are pending. You can't just wipe them all clean. What about Mike Flynn's son?
Yes,
he was also under investigation, and what happens to him? Because I think Flynn agreed to the deal because he didn't want his son prosecuted.
That was the rumor. And, the thing about conspiracy charges is that the statute of limitation only kicks in once there has been a last act in furtherance of a conspiracy. And if the conspiracy is accessory to a crime after the fact, or conspiracy to defraud the United States of America, if you keep doing that by obstructing justice, by spreading hostile Russian propaganda, you're still committing crimes. And it's so funny, they went out on this limb, the certain media properties, and people trying to defend Donald Trump, saying that Mike Flynn was unmasked and that this is this horrible thing. First of all, I just like to say, I know for a fact I have been unmasked before. I'm not going to go into why, but that there are lots of different foreign operators floating around, and if you've ever been on the phone with one and something came up, and you've probably been identified as, oh, okay, who's that guy he's talking to? Well, it's not the end of the world if you're not conspiring to try and take over U.S. foreign policy for dictators. It's no big deal. But on top, so these things happen all the time when just an intelligence or national security executive of some form says, "Oh, I need this. I need this unmasked." Who are they talking to there? Because that seems important. Like, for example, we know because Mr. Rick Grinnell, the acting with a heavy acting, doing a lot of work in this sense. The acting DNI, declassifying who got Flynn unmasked at that time, and they're like, okay, here's the list, and one of them is Samantha Power, who was UN ambassador, and it makes complete reasonable request. Wait a minute, somebody's conspiring against me with 3 other countries. Well, who is it?
Yeah,
and it turns out it's Mike Flynn, and but the call that was apparently leaked out was not from the unmasking, which makes sense because leaking defense information is a very serious felony. I don't think this is any less serious. But when it was revealed, no, that came from a Title III surveillance warrant, a criminal issue, not counterintelligence, that Mike Flynn was already under criminal investigation in addition to counterintelligence. And that is the kind of thing that they were trying to tell Mr. Trump. Hey, your boy Mike Flynn there has maybe a bit of a complicated backstory.
But of course,
so maybe he's...
For Donald Trump, he's like, everyone around here has got a complicated backstory. It's how you get to be part of my team. So,
well, that's right. They select for that. So this is why it was such a unique moment for everyone. Like, oh my God, he doesn't care that this guy is, compromised in terms of criminal investigations. They're like, that's this whole crew. That's my family. That's my family for multiple generations. We're mobsters.
This is what
we're
we
like
do.
That.
Meet the family. So you've got, Mike Flynn was also the vice chair of the transition committee, which means that Flynn was also responsible for hiring all these people, putting all these people in the administration in their jobs.
Hmm.
That's a significant position to put someone who you've already been warned has challenges. I want to leave you with one last quote, which I bet you have not seen. I had to verify this. Actually, I had to call Isaac Herzog's office directly to figure out if this was what he said. He denied saying it, but then I checked the transcript, checked the audio. He did say this. This is on election eve. A warning from Isaac Herzog, who was then the labor leader, the opposition leader in the Israeli Knesset. He's speaking about Netanyahu, and he says, recently there have been reports of Israeli leaders interfering in the elections through overseas proxies. I call on Netanyahu to instruct those close to him to make sure no damage is done. Direct quote, I've checked the transcript, checked with his office, 100% what he said. He wouldn't allow me to interview him, although I did have a conversation with him. This is really, really, really happened. It's underreported, but it certainly seems like in Israel, there was awareness, at least on election eve, that something was just happening. Something really
so
bad
they were
was
talking
happening.
about the American election, or not Israeli Knesset elections. They were talking about that there's
American
some Israeli.
elections.
Okay.
The night before the American elections, they were saying, we've heard Netanyahu's up to some no good here with his allies and through his proxies. He shouldn't do this because we've been through this before with the United States. It didn't work out well for us. So, I think referring to Pollard. So, a clear warning from his side that this was happening before any of us knew it was happening. Because for us, it was still Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia.
I think that, at a certain level, a lot of countries with serious intelligence services have not the same but similar views of, which country is doing what when. And I think, it would have been very obvious to anyone with, good access to intelligence who was doing what and maybe even why. And I can see from an Israeli perspective, because, our country is diverse, Britain is diverse, France is diverse, that Israel has different factions. And it sounds like Mr. Herzog was making comment like, if we go through with what's about to happen, there's going to be blowback. And maybe he didn't think of Trump being elected, but merely Israel being, revealed to be, in, active hostile intelligence service land rather than just our complicated allies who, I think people who know Israel and its situation and love its people, its culture, and appreciate its position in the world. You see it as a country that was born in difficulty and complexity and just kind of went from there. And that they always have a difficult balance to strike. However, just because we have a difficult situation doesn't mean we can't make just net mistakes. And attacking the United States' democracy, that's going to be a huge blow to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. I hope, in the same way that I hope that other countries don't hold Donald Trump against the rest of us who want to see this to be a just, democratic, pluralistic country that is a rock-solid leader, not just partner, but a leader for its allies, that they look at the Trump years as a horrible aberration and know that that's not all of America. And I hope that we extend a lot of that to other nations, with plenty of good people that, do see a democratic future and who won't be a bunch of mobsters, essentially.
I mean, absolutely. You'd hope the same thing is extended. And it's, maybe this is this misstep by Barr to try and reverse these Flynn allegations will finally put a spotlight into this area of what was Israel's involvement with Russia during that period of time, because it's hard to look at the timeline and not say Israel was there. They were there. So was the UAE. So was MBS. So was that. There's a lot of players involved. It's not just Flynn on one phone call to Kislyak. There's a lot of other things happening. And now with Flynn sort of coming back into the spotlight, a new judge going to look at this. I wonder what he'll have to find once they look at the whole set of circumstances, and whether this idea of Barr to try and backpedal in these charges just maybe backfiring on him at the end of the day.
Well, in public relations, they talk about the Streisand effect, that when there's something that you don't want called to public attention, if you have a lot of power, sometimes the harder you fight it, the more attention you draw to it. And
look at you with the Streisand reference. I like it.
I've got a few original cast recordings around here. What can I do?
I won't tell anyone.
William Barr, you look into it and you find out, wait a minute, who tried to get Barr onto Trump's team once Mueller was appointed was David Friedman, who is the current ambassador to Israel, who was law partners with Mark Kasowitz and was a bankruptcy attorney not only for Trump's casinos, but for a very interesting crew of the last 20 years of Enron and WorldCom, and then Lehman Brothers, and then,
Lehman Brothers, I didn't know that. That's an interesting new one for me. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was, all the greatest hits.
And that conversation between Friedman and Barr happened in Jerusalem, of all places. So Barr went to Jerusalem somewhere in 2016. He went to Jerusalem for, as one does, for a conversation with the ambassador before joining. The original ask was to join the legal team to defend Trump in the impeachment or some other various forms of lawsuits. And Barr wasn't having any of that, but then he ended up being the AG. So here he is.
Well,
now.
He was busy with Caterpillar working for Kirkland and Ellis, which has a lot of Russian ties as a law firm, and things get complicated really quick. Things we wouldn't have known without them calling all of this attention to look at Flynn, look at Barr, look at all these people, and you go, who are you, and what are you doing, and why are you doing it?
Exactly.
And
exactly. So here we are. I had no idea we'd be back in Trump Russia land before the elections, and here we are doing that again. Eric, thank you very much for a great time this evening. Thanks for joining me. It's been terrific. We have to do this again many, many times if you'll come.
Thank you for having me, and let's do it again.
All right, cheers. Have a good night.
Thanks, Zev.
Support Narativ's independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. And check out our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe and download.